Welcome. This is Signals from Pittsburgh. This is Brittany.
And this is Mr. Wills.
So it's October, and you know what that means. Halloween movies. Although this year's been a little weird with the shutdown pretty much in every country, the whole world, really. Many of us have had a lot more time to sit back and enjoy maybe some media, catch up on movies you've never seen, things like that. Hopefully discover some new things. And especially here in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, we've had a bit of a colder October to start, so it's the perfect way to start the month with a bunch of movies and hot tea or apple cider or whatever you like to drink around this time of year. So have you guys been getting into movies this year? What have you been watching?
What have I been watching? Well, I've been watching a few, but I was thinking about a specific film that we recently watched together about a love of movies, and I thought this is a perfect movie to unpack, but as I got further and further into it, I realized, it's kind of, I don't want to say one note, but there's not much to talk about, but it did lead me down the rabbit hole of what do we love about movies? What do we love about Halloween time in October and getting together with our friends, eating candy, getting around? And one of the things that I love to do, it's my fucking Christmas, and Christmas was canceled this year, and it's the Shock Around the Clock 24-hour horror marathon in Columbus at the Drexel Theater. It's what I look forward to every year. It's my Christmas. Christmas could be canceled, I'd be okay with it, but no Shock Around the Clock. And my good pal Joe Neff and Bruce, they put it on, and I was just lamenting and thinking about it as we were watching Fade to Black, and I reached out to my good friend Joe and asked if he would like to come on Signals from Pittsburgh and talk about some movies and possibly give his opinions and build our own marathon maybe at the end, and little history of Shock Around the Clock and our interactions and what he loves about movies. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joe Neff.
Many thanks. I am honored to be on your podcast, and being a lifelong devoted Romero fan, it's great to be on a podcast emanating from Pittsburgh, a city that holds a very special place in my heart.
Welcome.
We love it here. Welcome.
I feel too much pressure now, though. You've introduced this as your Christmas and how you're devastated that it was canceled, and I feel like I could never live up to that standard.
This makes up for it.
Okay. I'll do my best. So it's kind of like Santa Claus got to come in for a few minutes and tell you the gifts are all still out there. You just wait and you'll get them eventually, right?
Someday.
You're Santa Claus, and we're the kids that are cornered by the polar bear.
Oh my! Oh, the wait. Oh boy. Yeah. But no, thank you for having me on. I enjoy talking about horror films, and I've known you for a long time. I enjoy talking with you too. So,
absolutely, I'm glad. I really appreciate you coming on. Unfortunately, this was going to be Brittany's first year of coming to Shock Around the Clock. She's going to accompany me, but what better than to have you on, and we can kind of build our own marathon at the end. But before we get into that, we did watch Fade to Black, and I don't want to say we weren't fans of it, but we were still unpacking it. But then you love the film, so I would love to hear your opinion on it. I want to hear Joe's review, and we can kind of pepper in our opinions and counterpoint maybe.
I think it's a really interesting film. I mean, I heard about Fade to Black for a long time before seeing it, which was maybe only 6 or 7 years ago. And I think it was reading horror movie books over the years. You see that movie poster, or you see the still with Dennis Christopher's face painted half black, and where he's in the middle of it being half black and half nothing. So I forget when I first saw it. It was probably on an old DVD, but it's interesting because I think it has this reputation as being a slasher film, which it sort of is, but it's much more of this really interesting character piece about film fanaticism and obsession. And I just you talking about it, I was thinking about this depiction of a guy who's so into movies and whose life is like basically a rehash of movies. Everything he does is filtered through some kind of old reference. And this came out in 81 or 82, I think.
I believe.
And thinking back, that's so much more common today with the internet. It's so much easier to just completely dive down into obsession with either movies or your special kind of movies or some section of fandom. And it's the internet's made that so much more of a normal part of modern culture. I mean, what is the resurgence in comic book movies? What is that but fan culture being legitimized? It's no longer stuck in the dark. So it's interesting looking back at Fade to Black, and that was still a time when people like that were considered to be much more of an outcast than they would be today. But still, that film does a really good job of depicting how that fine line between being a fanatic and also going way too far with that and having it take over your life. But we were talking about this beforehand, and it's interesting to talk much more about it past just appreciating that depiction, and that performance is kind of hard because that's the movie, you know?
Yeah, I think it needs to be seen. I didn't hate the film. It was just, we're like, okay, on a whim, let's watch this, and this can be a movie we can review because it has a lot of notoriety. And what did you think about it, Britt?
Well, all I knew about it, I actually knew nothing about it before I watched it, other than the cover art, which you mentioned, Joe, which I always loved and kind of intrigued me into putting it on my, list that never ends of things that I want to watch. So we watched it, and I tend to get caught up in a lot of the technical stuff because I have a background in film and video production on the technical side. So sometimes I try to put that to the side. And going into Fade to Black, not knowing anything about it at all, I didn't know what to expect. Like you said, it did a good job portraying the main character, our hero, or villain, however you want to consider him. It did a good job getting that point across that he is in that fandom. He's kind of an outcast at that time, and he's an example of what it is to go too far. So I think that part was portrayed well, and we had some confusion with editing and things like that as we were watching it. It seemed like there's a lot of storylines going on that took forever to intersect or didn't ever quite connect. It was a strange film.
That was our main beef, I think, and I don't mean it like. Yeah. Once again, it wasn't an unenjoyable experience. I recommend the film. I think you should watch it. And you saying it's one of your you say it's one of your favorites, or you enjoy it quite a lot?
I like it a lot. I mean, I've only seen it twice, so I'm not sure if I can count it as one of my favorites. But I would watch it again. Just for the interest level.
Absolutely. The thing that took me about it, guys, and I want to get both of your input on this is, so there is, the main story, which is the young Bimford. He's obsessed with movies. He lives with his aunt. She's kind of a little bit overbearing, but neurotic, but saying that she was going to be a star, but something happened with his mother and father have since passed away, so she's being taken care of by him, and he's really obsessed with James Cagney. Like, that seems to be the main one. Outside of the horror realm, he loves horror movies, but James Cagney, specifically in White Heat, he emulates him a lot throughout the movie. He's got an obsession with Marilyn Monroe, and then the love interest we find later is actually a dead ringer. Like, the casting in this was great. The girl that they got to play Marilyn, and her name in the movie is Marilyn, looked exactly like her. I don't know what you guys thought of her, but I thought she was great. My point being is, there was like a detective spin on it, where there's, I believe, he's a psychiatrist. Am I right?
That Tim Thomerson, I think, is the...
Yeah, I think
it's from Trancers. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Of Trancers fame, and it's almost like a different movie. It's like he comes into the police office, or the police department rather, has interactions with the police department. Clearly is making a pass at one of the female officers, which, spoiler alert, he ends up hooking up with. But it feels like a different movie. It feels like two movies that don't quite fit together, and then they eventually intersect.
Like two short films where they both got instructions on like an outline, but didn't communicate with each other, and then the editor had to try and string it together, because you pretty much never see these storylines directly cross over. Like, these guys got called into the police station, no interview. They just cut to these police officers just interviewed me. Well,
it's all exposition. Yeah, it's all the interaction is exposition till the very end. But I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah.
I've never done that much reading into it, and actually, for seeing it twice, I forget the Tim Thomerson section every time, even though he's one of the most memorable parts of the movie. He's such an awful person. That's the thing I mentioned when we were talking that Vinegar Syndrome's going to be bringing this out on Blu-ray in November, end of November, I would be interested to see what kind of extras they might have and insights into the making of it. Because you're right. I mean, what's pitched as this film about an obsessive loner. To have the cop show up and be part of the film, but not really part of the film, it is kind of a quirky little part of its charm, I guess, or that might be a way to say it. The older I get, I am so much more forgiving than I used to be about movies. So it's hard for me anymore to say like, I didn't like something, or that was pretty bad. So that might also be part of my reaction. But I think some of it too is, and some of the appeal of the film is like a lot of 80s films now, even for people who were born in the 80s or lived in the 80s, is they look back at them and say, oh, there's, it's like, oh, it's pre-cell phones. It's the internet being ubiquitous. There's a real analog quality to it. There's a little bit of transgressive quality to some of it. And there's like a deep appeal because of that. But you're right. I mean, it's a little shaggy in some parts, to be sure.
But you're selling me on it now. Warts and all.
That's my job. That's all I do. From running the marathons. Brittany, this is my whole job at the marathons. It's like we introduce everyone in the films. And it's my job to make the disreputable sound great. Like, oh, you're going to love this, guys. It's a wonderful treatise on humanity, not just a sleazy exploitation film.
No, I love that. I love when people can kind of bring up a different perspective on it, or, make me consider things that maybe I didn't consider myself the first time I saw it.
Yeah, I think it's also the old English teacher in me, and that for 10 years I had to sell classic literature to teenagers. So it's finding whatever hook you can in that to say, oh, no, really, if you hang on long enough, there's a murder in this. Or, one of the first things I ever taught was King Arthur, just the standard, classic tales to freshmen. And I had to say, I know you guys will think this is boring, but really there's like a demon that appears and a succubus and 2 murders and a duel and a dragon. So hang in there, really. If you look through that, it's going to be good.
Yeah.
I like the highlights.
That's one way to sell it. That's for sure. I'd buy it.
Here's the trailer.
Yeah.
So no, I love it.
No, well, I'm looking forward to that Vinegar Syndrome release then, because it would be really nice to get some extra insight on, maybe where they're going with it, or what the production process was of that movie, and things like that. All the bonus material.
Personal highlights of this film, just to kind of wrap it up here. Young Mickey Rourke, in what I understand to be his second ever role, rather. Easy for me to say. And I love that he gets murdered. Spoiler alert. So I mean, and it's like good looking. I love. I don't want to say ugly Mickey Rourke, but I love grizzled and good looking Mickey Rourke. I'm a fan of both.
It's kind of a precursor for a lot of Mickey Rourke roles too. He's just like the kind of good looking, but an asshole, and gets his comeuppance. Yeah.
What were some of your favorite parts of Fade to Black before we move on here?
Okay, so it's been a couple years since I've seen it. What I remember, the scene where it's the payoff for the promo art, where he paints his face white to be the vampire in the theater. I remember liking that quite a bit. Just all the interactions he has with the Marilyn Monroe lookalike. I think it's interesting because, especially for that time, Marilyn Monroe had only been dead for 20 years or so. Which is, it's crazy. And that was kind of like the resurgence of her as a pop culture icon. Like when the Elvis mania was hitting in the late 80s, after there's been time enough after his death. And I think it's really interesting because it's played straight. It's not like she thinks that he's a weird, obsessive goofball. She sees the kind of the scruffy charm in him, but you as the audience know what's really going on. And the fact that it's not played as, that it's played as like, oh, there could be maybe some little something between these people, but there's no way it's going to happen because, there's a tragedy to who he is. And I think it's interesting that Dennis Christopher, who plays him, and this was like, I think a year or so after Breaking Away when he did that, he's a pretty good looking guy in real life. He's not some troll,
right.
Which I think like by conventional standards of especially then what was considered to be male attractiveness, he's a good looking guy. And it gets you on his side so much that then you have to reconsider everything else in that, because he's very twisted in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. There are some pretty messed up things that he does, but I agree with you. I like that her affection for him is pretty sincere, and it kind of
she's very pure.
She is very pure. She's very naive, but very, very pure. But I also love the fact there were some nods. In fact, when they went to the theater, the movie they were watching was Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, yeah.
And I was talking with to you, Brittany, when we initially watched it. I said, oh, they did that because Night of the Living Dead was in public domain. But at the credits, they actually got the rights from the Laurel Company. So I'm like, wow, that's like one of the few films that actually went through the proper channels and licensed Night of the Living Dead.
Way to make sure, yeah.
So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I really like that. I thought that was cool. Britt, what were some of your favorite moments from the movie?
Oh my God, all my favorite moments are going to be like those, like the silly moments, honestly. Because I've only seen it once, those really stood out. When our psychiatrist and police officer first sleep together and they just cut to them kind of finishing up and they come up out of the blankets and he's just holding a box of Cheez-Its. He had the box of Cheez-Its under the blanket. And so that was really unexpected and just totally cracked me up. You know, got to snack on a couple things at once, apparently. What else? There was I can't remember her name. The girl that played Marilyn. Mm-hmm. Or she didn't play Marilyn, but she was the lookalike. I loved the bubbly stuff that happened with her. She like gets distracted, goes on this date with another guy, and then halfway through the date, when he's trying to convince her to come home with him, she's like, "Oh no, I forgot I was supposed to go on this other date. I gotta go. Bye." So she tries to like make up for that, and you know it doesn't work out. And then her friend at the end, when she wants to sign up for the photo shoot with our hero / villain. And her friend's like, I'm not letting you go there alone. No way. I'm going to drop you out. So she like walks her to the door and she's like, okay, see you later.
Right.
So she gets her there, but it doesn't like make sure she's all right. And, you know, then the climax of the movie happens. So those are the things that stand out to me in my first viewing. And it's just all the most ridiculous parts of it. So, I mean, appreciating multiple viewings is probably something that I should go back with, especially with a new release. But
well, yeah, Joe enlightened us here to the release of Vinegar Syndrome, so actually we're going to have to pick that one up.
And I am not paid to say that by Vinegar Syndrome, so this is part of my
life.
I give so many free plugs to people that I have nothing to do with. So,
but I'm not beyond. I don't want to speak for the 24-hour Shock Around the Clock, but we are not beyond pandering to people. So if we'll get sponsors from Vinegar Syndrome, please send us DVDs. We will review them.
These are fine people.
We'll watch them.
Yes, they're quality. Please, if you're listening, send them things.
But
send me something too. I don't know.
Yeah. Send Joe something. Joe loves movies. Joe turns every October. Joe turns me on to something new. Well, actually, our first episode and kind of what led to the impetus of our podcast was Bliss, which I had seen for the first time at the 24-hour marathon Shock Around the Clock, and I was just like, this movie is awesome, and I would not have known about it if it weren't for you. And that's one of the main things I look forward to, not only your dissection or introduction of the movies, and we'll get into this, we'll pitch it to you in 1 second, but I have to say, you get up there and you just give a lecture on each movie, and a lot of times you say, you guys don't want to hear me talk, and that's bullshit, because you're the reason I go, because you could be like, we could be watching fucking Prom Night 6, it doesn't exist, but
it's a good idea,
it could be like a straight to video, but you will sell it like it's Lawrence of Arabia, and I am hooked.
Well, thank you.
And I honestly mean that from the bottom of my heart. Now, 3 minutes in, I might be like, well, my coffee's pretty low. I better get... Yeah, but I'm...
Well, that's what makes those type of festivals and things is the people. I mean, it's, I could go watch those movies anytime on my own, but to see them big with a nice introduction from somebody who has something genuine to say makes all the difference in those scenarios. So appreciate your work.
I have often said that in another life, I was probably a carny. or a con artist or something, because you talk about intros to the marathons, you're looking at 23 years of kind of gradually developing that, and I'll give credit to my partner in crime, Bruce Bartu, who started the events in Columbus. When I started attending the festivals many years ago, I initially his intros were kind of what I took my cue from when I started. And then once I started it was like 97 or 98 was the first time I did any kind of real introductions. It's just been a long process of saying, okay, I want to kind of do what he's doing, but I also want to kind of make this my own. And it's ever evolving. And some would say, I know you won't admit this, but some would say I'm a little wordy sometimes. But thank you. I appreciate that.
It's come from the heart. Thank you once again. I love it. I've gone to other I've cheated on you. I've gone to other marathons, and it just doesn't have the same punch. I mean, and not to discredit those marathons. It's something special that happens at the Drexel in Columbus, or we were at the Grandview a couple times, but like wherever, you always bring the energy, and it's not just the films. It's not only the introduction, it's the atmosphere that you guys create, and you guys really make it an event, and that's hard to do. I mean, it's impossible now, but it's hard to do each and every year, and you guys never disappoint. So
you're right. I mean, it's interesting that there's 4 24-hour horror marathons that have been running consistently for at least 10 years. There's us in Columbus, there's the Exhumed Films Marathon in Philadelphia, and there's 2 in Chicago. One at the Music Box Theater, and then another by the former organizer of the Music Box one that has kind of bounced between theaters. And I haven't been to one of those, but I have seen some video from them. And they all have a very different dynamic. And I've been to the Philadelphia one, and it's like the Philadelphia one is truly a marathon, because it's these 4 guys who were teenage friends who've been doing programs for 25 years now. And they get up in the beginning of the event and they do this very long introduction. I should note that one of the main organizers is also a high school English teacher. I had to tell him at one point, even though I'd retired from teaching high school English, I had to tell him, I appreciate that you can still be a high school English teacher and put these things on, because that's not an admirable thing sometimes. But they get up and talk for a while and give away some prizes, and then they start the first film, and everything's on film. And then they literally go feature film, immediately followed by 3 or 4 trailers, immediately followed by the next film. And until right before the final film, it just goes. And it's so different. And it really makes you recalibrate like how you experience it. I've had a couple of friends of mine who've come out, and it's a shock to them because they're used to our marathons where you get these breaks in between and you get to socialize more. And I like their marathon in Philadelphia because it's different, but it's interesting how that dynamic for each marathon is totally different in terms of what we do. But that, I think, is what kind of hurt us the most this year with canceling the marathon. Some people asked us, could you do like a virtual marathon? And I said, well, it's not the same though. We're a victim of our own success, because I think, like you say, that's the hallmark of what we do, is that personal in-person touch. And without feeling the dynamic of the crowd and without having us kind of be there in person, I mean, we could record intros to all the films and try to do something online, but it's not the same, And I always took that when I started going to these events when Bruce was running them many years ago, was it really felt from day one like this family I had never discovered, and now I was part of them. And this guy who was kind of the de facto leader, father, uncle, I don't know, who was very personable. And when I first talked with him the first few times, as just this young guy who was just in awe. He was so nice to me, and it was just like he was just a guy, and that kind of is what led me into the events, and I've never forgotten that we're all here together, and I like to think I never have like a bigger sense of myself than what I am. I organize it, I put the show on, I do all that stuff, but I'm just a fan. One of the best parts of the marathon experience for me was many years ago when I first started when I kind of restarted the 24-hour horror marathon at another theater in Columbus. I was under the impression that I had to be behind the scenes the entire time, and that I had to like be working the entire time, even though I wasn't technically on the clock during that part. And it took me 4 or 5 years to discover, you run the event, you can enjoy the event, it's okay. You can go and sit and watch the movies too, and that's the highlight for me. I love doing the events, but I love being there with the people and just experiencing everything with them. That's the main impetus for me. So
got to have a healthy balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really appreciate it. That's why, I mean, the numbers don't lie. It seems like you've been growing and growing each year, and word of mouth, and satisfied people will come back. And I've never ever walked out of a marathon not thinking I didn't get my entertainment or my money's worth. Like I said, I look forward to it each year. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Will has hyped me up quite a bit. So when you do start doing them again, I'll be there.
Oh boy, I have such a expectation level to live up to now. Don't worry. If we do this, if we do this and you're there, I'm going to be paying attention the whole time. Like, is Brittany okay? Does she like this? Is this bad? Is this bad? Oh boy, yeah, I'm so nervous. Yeah,
yeah. I'll be on the spot then too. No.
All right.
No, but so we'll kind of rewind the clock a little bit. We'll go back just a little bit and kind of start from the beginning of you and the show. But I want to kind of ask, where are you from? What's your history? What kind of cultivated your love of movies? How did you get to that point of being involved with the show?
Born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, to a family who had lived in Columbus for all their lives too. To the fact that when I was growing up, I lived in a house right down the street from where my mom grew up. A house that my brother eventually moved into and that my niece lives in now. So the Neff family is kind of like the mob in a lot of ways. We all, when I moved up to Boston last year, and that was kind of like, being exiled because we all still live in Columbus or right in Columbus. So, I'm raised in that way. I have 3 sisters and an older brother and kind of got influenced by them. If I really want to like pinpoint why I fell in love with movies, I go to my parents in a lot of ways. My dad was a huge movie fanatic and about as, I'm looking for the right word here, about as universal as you can when it gets to his love in movies. He would watch anything and would be perfectly happy sitting down on the weekend just to kind of watch 3 or 4 movies on a Saturday or a Sunday or whatever like that. So I think I got a lot of it from him. My mom was not quite as much into that, but she loved Disney, everything having to do with Disney. So that was part of my upbringing, which I think kind of balances things out because my dad was much more into crime movies and gangster movies and horror films. My mom was into Disney. My mom famously, when they saw Psycho in 1960, did not know what was coming, and to her dying day would not watch that movie again because she was so petrified by it. We showed Psycho in 2010 at the second Shock Around the Clock, and I said, "Mom, you should really show up and introduce the movie. I think the crowd would love it." She said, "No. I won't." She wouldn't even show up to like be around the movie. But I think like their twin enthusiasms for that really like for those 2 sides of the light, the dark, or the wholesome and the not so wholesome really shaped me. Yeah. And they were also 2 people who always encouraged any creative endeavors I had. From a young age, they encouraged me to read, to listen to music, to watch movies, to draw. I mean, I can't tell you for when I was a child, I was going to be a comic book artist someday, even though I can't draw with a lick. But it was their support for that because I think they got it that, the arts are special in a lot of ways. And I also think that I often tell the story at the science fiction marathons. My mom, I credit her in a lot of ways because when I was, I think 9 or 10, we were sitting there one night. My dad used to work out of town a lot. He was an electrician. And we were sitting there and 2001 Space Odyssey comes on the TV, back when they used to run it on the Turner networks. Yeah. And it was probably halfway through the movie, but I started watching it and she had seen it a few times. And of course, 2001 ends the way it does. And I turned to my mom and I said, what did that mean? And she says, I don't know. And it was such an inspiring moment. Like it was one of the first times I realized as a young person, like, there's stuff out there that just doesn't have an explanation or a clear explanation.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was such an inspiring moment. And I always go back to that, my mom was totally on board with saying, you should watch this again, or you should explore that. My middle sister, Chris, I have to give her credit too. And Will knows this because Chris attended her first marathon last fall at Shock Around the Clock. Chris is one of the biggest Stephen King fans that I know. And from, Chris is 11 years older than me. So she was in high school when I was in grade school, and I would always get the down low on everything related to Stephen King through her. And I was never allowed to really watch R-rated movies when I was a kid. When all my classmates in 5th grade were allowed to watch Nightmare on Elm Street, I wasn't. Curiously, I remember when Creepshow came on HBO when it had its first run, and we watched that movie like 7 or 8 times, and no one ever said anything about me being in the room for that. I guess they figured, it's a comic book movie. It can't be that bad. With all the grisly things that go on in that. But
right.
But Chris would fill me in on all the Stephen King stuff, and she would occasionally kind of, sneak an R-rated movie in here or there, like when my parents went to bed. I remember watching Silver Bullet with her because it was a Stephen King movie, and thinking it was somewhat taboo. But Chris would always fill me in on that stuff. I told the story last fall that when the novel came out, she was reading it, and I asked her, what's that about? And she started telling the story about the first chapter, and Georgie walking along and seeing the clown in the sewer, and she's telling me, and I'm just enwrapped in the story. And she says, and then he bends down, and Pennywise says, "Do you know what things do down here?" "What?" "They float." And right as she said they float, she reached out and grabbed my arm, and I was just petrified. And boy, the hook was sunk deep in me at that point. So I think that's kind of how I got into that. Curiously enough, movies were always a part of our lives, but I used to be pretty similar to, I think, a lot of people even today, in that we used to go to the theaters maybe 2 or 3 times a year, see the new Disney film, or see, I remember when the Burton Batman came out in '89, that was something we went to see. But movies were more kind of something in the background you'd get into. And it wasn't until I went to my first 24-hour marathon in Columbus in 1993 that it all came together for me. And I think this preoccupation or addiction or passion, choose your own word, really took hold of me. Because the marathons, to me, I knew about them for quite a while beforehand, and I kind of follow along what was happening, but I never thought I'd really be into them. And a high school friend of mine finally said, "Oh, I'm going to go to this. You want to go?" And I just said, "Sure. I guess, yeah, it'll be something." And it was such an eye-opener because it was a place where it was all about science fiction, but all movies were equal. The trashiest movie could sit alongside a classic, could sit along an unknown film, and they all had equal value. And that to me, that opened up my mind towards not just horror and science fiction, but movies in general. That everything was worth a shot, and even the most disreputable movie could have value right alongside an Oscar winner or a classic that everybody loves.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you guys still maintain that. Unfortunately, this year was going to be my first sci-fi marathon because usually I'm working during the sci-fi marathon, but things have changed. So I had taken that weekend off, and I was actually talking about Brittany to come down. So I had gone to the horror marathon for over a decade, but Brittany and I both love sci-fi too. So it wasn't any knock on that, but it's your marathon stands heads above because of this reason. You can see anything from Edison Frankenstein to Serbian film in the same night. And I say that with love and devotion because I love that. I love that you can see, you could possibly see, little monsters, you could see critters, but you could also see, inside or, there's nothing, I don't think there, I don't, you run the gamut in a spectacular fashion.
I tell you, Serbian film is the gift that keeps on giving because what you just said, it will always be for so many people the ultimate example of the bottom end, the most extreme end, the whatever that is. And it's I haven't even seen the film since I first saw it, but it's wonderful to have that for your sales point that is just so aptly made. And I think we showed Edison's Frankenstein either that year or the year before. So yeah.
So historical movies with, definite historical reverence and, impact. And then I guess for other reasons, extreme shock, Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, or Make Them Die Slowly, some of the Cronenberg things, not to get too far ahead, but it's great. That's what I love about it. I love that, and I appreciate that was that birthed out of going? Is that something you just maintain, or did that come from your father where he watched everything? So once you got to that age, you're like, I'm just going to keep going. And,
it's interesting because I'm thinking back as we're talking to my history of organizing things. And my first marathon that I had any hand in was an all-nighter in 1997 at one of the Drexel theaters that's no longer around. And then the first time I emceed one was the following year, 1998, but it was also an all-nighter. So to start out with an all-nighter format is different because when you're running, I think we ran 10 p.m. to noon back in those days, you're kind of cutting out a lot of films you could show because you don't want to have too many slower films or more deliberately paced films because people are automatically trying to stay awake. So it wasn't until 1999 that I did my first 24-hour. And my entire template at that point was what Bruce Bartu had done back at the old Drexel North with the horror marathon. So I kind of thought, well, if it worked there, that should be the formula I'd pick up. And so I kind of took it from that. As the years went along, when Bruce and I started working together in 2004 for another series of all-nighter marathons, that was right around the time that a lot of the extreme Japanese films were really becoming popular, and there was a real resurgence in interest in Italian horror films around that time. This is, right in the middle of the DVD boom, so a lot of people are able to see this stuff in great versions anyway. So even then, like our programming was tailored towards that, towards having like, oh, here's some really like crazy extreme stuff, or here's some stuff that's, some premieres you might not have seen. It wasn't until we started doing the 24-hour again in 2009 that I had to kind of start thinking about, okay, so what's the formula? What do we do, and how does that work? And not to get too far ahead, but I've seen the films you guys picked for our next portion of the show, and you did my work for me in a lot of ways, because I think one of the guiding principles we've had since 2009 was you always have to look to what's going on right now. It can never just be a nostalgia fest. Not that I think those are always bad. Like when the Exhumed Marathon in Philadelphia, their crowd is like a really hardcore horror crowd. And as a result, most of what they show is like 70s and 80s movies, and oftentimes kind of obscure 70s and 80s movies. And it works really well because that's the formula, and that works for them. For us, I think if we tried to do that, it wouldn't quite come across, because I think in a lot of ways, our audience, even though they've changed a bit over the years, they now know that formula we have, which is throw in a little bit of everything. I think it's what makes our audience really great too, because you'll get people who are really into classic horror, but you'll also get people who are into Serbian film, if anyone's into Serbian film, whoever those people are. But then you'll get people who just like premieres, or you'll get people who like the Italian stuff. And you can feel when you're attending the event that all those people, I often say it's like the Twisted Family reunion, where you might not see these people only once or twice a year. You might not even want to talk to them. But for one day, you get to share all of your common interest or all of your divergent interest. You get to share that.
Yes.
And that's kind of guided us for a while. I mean, it's been the consistent just formula we've had, that a little bit of everything generally works the best.
So I'm cheating here, and I pulled up your website, but from what you can check out yourself at either sci-fi-marathon.com or horror-marathon.com. And it says, so the one that you first emceed, you said was 1999. Is that correct, Jeff?
It was the 1998 Bride of Shocktoberfest all-nighter.
Oh, okay, 1998.
1999 was my first 24-hour that I had a hand in.
So on that line, so just to give you listeners a kind of idea, so even on that night, you guys showed Reanimator, the Ohio. It says the Ohio premiere of Black Sunday. Was that was the Ohio premiere?
That might be mislabeled. It was the Ohio premiere of a movie called The Ugly, which is
The Ugly.
I think it's a New Zealand horror film. Doesn't get much publicity these days.
It's something to check out. There we go, deep cut. And then it says you had Last House on the Left,
of course,
which is a classic. the Hunger.
Yeah, which many people say is the only movie I watch, along with Suspiria, but we'll let them speculate on that.
So Kung Fu Cannibals, which I've not seen.
Okay. So the story, I have to briefly, the Kung Fu Cannibals story. So there was the legendary rockabilly artist / Hollywood sleaze maven Johnny Legend, who's the brother of Lynn Margulies, who Courtney Love played in Man on the Moon, the Andy Kaufman movie. So he has a wrestling connection too. Johnny Legend used to be a distributor for a lot of films that Grindhouse Releasing has now kind of taken over. And it was, it was stuff like that. It was, weirdo exploitation stuff from the 60s and 70s. So we tried to show Kung Fu Cannibals in 1998. And he could not find half the print. So we didn't end up being able to show it. So then we tried to book it again in 2005, and he still couldn't find half the print, so we didn't show it. I later found out Kung Fu Cannibals is actually a movie called Raw Force, which is now out on Blu-ray. I think it's out from Vinegar Syndrome. So there you go, Vinegar Syndrome, another plug for your stuff. There is some kung fu and there are some cannibals. It's kind of more of a oddball exploitation action film. But we did not get to show it, unfortunately. We instead showed I believe it was the Ohio premiere of a movie called Six String Samurai, which is not really a horror film, but is spoken very well of by a lot of people who attended that one.
And this is a great reference for any of you that actually have attended his marathons or just kind of see what they're about. Check out this website, because you guys have, and I know you guys have tons of archive footage too. Do you have a YouTube?
We do. I haven't uploaded anything in a while. I've been lazy. That's okay. I will look that up, and so I can give the free plug.
Okay,
we'll come back around to it.
Absolutely. Before we get into our picks, because part of this show was us building our own marathon and kind of diving into the movies and why we chose them. But before we start that, I'm going to be a little self-indulgent. As you like to say, you say I'm going to be self-indulgent about this film. I'm going to be self-indulgent. The first show I went to, I guess, was your first 24 that you programmed, because it was 2009. It was the doubleheader. It was called the two-headed. Hold on.
That was the two-headed marathon.
Incredible two-headed marathon.
Yeah, I did 5 years of 24-hour marathons at Studio 35 in Columbus.
That was 2008.
And then Bruce and I collaborated in 2004 for the two-headed marathon. And then in 2009, we restarted the 24-hour horror marathon. This is so difficult to explain to people who have no interest in the minutia of marathon history.
Well, but that's what this is about, so go ahead. Enlighten us.
It's just, it's science fiction. We basically had an uninterrupted stream for 37 years or so. But horror is this, like, it's appropriate for horror because it keeps getting killed and keeps getting resurrected. So yeah, I think so. Did you go in 2008 to the two-headed marathon?
That was the initial one.
Okay.
I went to, and I saw it was Kill Baby Kill.
Oh yeah.
Hills Have Eyes, Meet the Feebles, Make Them Die Slowly, The Fog, and Let the Right One In. And I have kind of Let the Right One In. I believe that was like the first film you screened.
It was the second film.
Second.
Yeah, we showed Kill Baby Kill first, which people did not like. I don't know why.
I liked Mario Bava. I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, let the Right One In. I had I wasn't into. I'll fess up. I was not into horror and horror. Easy for me to say, foreign horror at that time, and I was not into. It wasn't like I was opposed to it. I was just not exposed. And I had my friends from Akron. I was living in Akron at the time. I had friends that were going to school in Columbus, and like, oh, we always go to this horror thing. We have a costume party, and then we do the marathon. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. So I got dragged along. Those people have since moved to California, and I kept going. I was like, well, I'm not going to stop going. I love this. So,
holding down the fort.
I was holding down. Yeah, I was keeping the faith, as they say, but as Billy Joel would say. But Let the Right One In. That was like the first time, and like I think I almost openly wept. Like that movie is so beautiful, and now it's lauded as one of the best foreign films and independent films, and has since been remade and what have you. But the original, and that was the Midwest premiere. You guys had it first because it came to Cleveland. Yeah. It came to Cleveland later, and I saw it again. Mm-hmm. But after seeing that, like, I got chill, and I didn't realize like what a foreign movie or an independent movie could do until I saw Let the Right One In. And I want to thank you guys for that. But I love that film.
I'll give all the credit in the world to Jeff Frank, who was running the Drexel at the time. Strange little moments in the history of the event. Like we have oftentimes not had the same renown as bigger events or bigger festivals, because we're kind of a festival, but we're not like a traditional festival. You buy one ticket and get in, and you don't like clear the theater after every screening, right? So sometimes it's harder for us to get premieres, because in explaining what we are, people say, well, so are you a festival, or are you just kind of an all-nighter, or are you a thing that you do?
It's a hybrid.
Yeah, but Let the Right One In is one of those that kind of snuck through the gates at a certain point, and which is great, because yeah, that's one of my favorite marathon premieres by far.
And you guys had it before a lot of anyone, I think. Well, obviously in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And then it became a hit. So it just seemed like, I don't know if that was just a happy accident or happenstance, but that was, you guys were the fourth. So that really solidified my love. I'm like, these guys are legitimate. There was, and I'll digress. I'll get off my soapbox here, but so riffing. Can we talk about riffing at the marathon? Because I know you see both sides of it.
The history. Well, when I first started attending in 1993, that was one of the charms of the event, was the crowd was so active. I mean, I was, the Drexel North in its heyday, you were getting 750 people in there, and there was like a lot of art students from CCAD. Columbus was a little bit different back then, so there was a bit more of an underground art community and music community. So you get a lot of people from that, and just a lot of wise asses. And it was around the time that Mystery Science Theater 3000 was really hitting its stride. And so the first few years I went, that was part of the great charm, was the callbacks and the riffing, and it wasn't always successful, but there was a lot of there was a lot of good-natured energy in the crowd when it came to that. That's changed over the years. It's
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I keep bringing up the Exhumed Marathon in Philadelphia, but they have a strict no talking policy where they'll warn you once if you want to start riffing, but if you keep doing it, they'll just ask you to leave, which works for them too, because it's hard to describe, but you can still feel the enthusiasm of the crowd, even though nobody's really like doing a callback or whatever. We've been a little less Catholic about that over the years. We always stick to just saying, look, there will be times during this if someone wants to say stuff, you'll know when it is, but you might not be as funny as you think you are. I figured that out years ago, but I'm probably not as funny in that crowd as I think I am. So I'm just going to shut up and watch the movies. As we get younger and younger attendees, a lot of them have tended to grow up mainly communicating online or doing things where they themselves don't really have to put themselves out. And so a lot of them, I think, are more used to a more passive experience in that way. They're maybe less inclined to be more vocal like at the event. Isn't to say that we don't get some folks who make some funny comments now and again. We also get some old timers who try to start things that there's nothing to do. They just it flames out spectacularly. But
we just no sell it, and it just keeps going.
I'll give you an example of crowd riffing and crowd reaction in my philosophy on this, even when it frustrates me. So I think you were there 2 years ago. 2 years ago when we showed The Innocents. Yeah, which is a film I love and I think is just really disturbing. And there was a decent representation of the crowd, because we played the second, that thought anything when the children were saying creepy adult-like things was just the funniest thing in the world. And just like, these kids, and it just kind of annoyed me. But at the same time, I've always had this philosophy that the crowd is the crowd. And the crowd is going to, once you start showing the movie, you can tell people shut up if they're being annoying. We've had a couple instances of people where they just won't shut up and they annoy people and someone throws a drink at them, and I won't go into all that story, but yeah. Which I don't recommend, by the way. Please don't throw drinks at people if they're talking.
Don't do that.
But I've always thought, like, I can set the movie up as much as I want to, and we can say whatever we want, but once you start the movie is then the crowd's movie. And what they make of it is good. I think most of the time the crowd ends up making something kind of special out of things you wouldn't expect. I always bring up when we showed You're Next in 2014. And I had thought, this is it's a fun movie. You guys have seen it. And so we led off the marathon with that. And I thought, this is something that the people will like because they've seen it. And just on a whim, we said, okay, so how many of you have seen this? And there were like 3 people in the audience who said they had. And so we realized, this is like a de facto premiere. And boy, it felt like a film that was a premiere that no one had seen. And the crowd just went wild for that film. And some of the best applause. Amazing. Yeah, we've been trying to catch lightning in a bottle ever since, like that. When we showed Mandy last year, had the same thing. Yeah. We only had maybe 4 or 5 people in the crowd who'd seen it, and just shocked. And it kind of played like a premiere. I mean, that's a much different headspace to be in watching that film. But yeah, I mean, the crowd is the crowd. And there are crowds that are much more vocal. The Case Western University in Cleveland runs a science fiction marathon every year in January. And that's oftentimes a very vocal crowd. And that can be kind of annoying sometimes. But it's their crowd, So if you go there, you understand, okay, that's what I'm buying into. And I take the chance that maybe they won't shut up during a film I like. But our crowd's pretty good. I think also we kind of set the tone that we're having fun, but we also, people understand that we as hosts are really into the event, and it's not just something where we're making fun of films. We're saying, here's a bunch of bad films.
Right.
I hope that was explanatory enough.
Absolutely.
Not rambling.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it makes me even more excited. You can't get that experience at home. Like, it's, if the crowd decides to be annoying or be excitable or whatever. I mean, that's kind of what you go to a theater for, especially something like a marathon. Like, once you get into hour 16, you might be going a little nuts in terms of, yelling things out, or who knows. I can imagine the ebb and flow of the crowd throughout different movies. And I think that's what would probably make it special, because you can watch these movies at home, but you can't watch it like that.
It really is. I think you're right about when things hopefully return to semi-normal, that people will flock to theaters, because there is nothing like that. It is still one of the great communal experiences of our time. I mean, you look at the concert industry, That's and the convention industry. Those have been booming for years because as more and more of our activities move online, I think people really want that shared interest. You're reminding me of this, and I know it's Serbian film again, but when we watched Serbian film together in 2011, that was a movie where I had done enough research that I knew about the gruesome things that happened. Still, watching that film with the crowd, you could feel this very uneasy tension, like what's going to happen next. And I always remember this, talking about callbacks. There is an extremely graphic scene that is probably one of the most notorious in the whole movie where the central character gains a level of extremely graphic revenge on one of his tormentors in a way I will not describe because I don't want to really get into it, but it's about as bad as you can think. And when that happened, we had this one guy in the crowd just shout out, "Yes!" And it was like he'd been waiting for it his entire life, I thought, oh, that guy must be so happy. I can only wonder what's inside his head. That it's like, you must have been waiting a long time to see something like this. And you'd never get that at home. You're watching Serbian film at home, you'd probably just think, oh, this is kind of pervy and gross and disturbing, But
right,
yeah. It's you're making me all misty for the marathons now because I missed that this year quite a bit.
We'll get back there.
Yes, absolutely. I maintain that if Serbian film needs to be viewed it's required to be viewed with at least one other person. I bought the Blu-ray I never watch it alone. I only buy it to invite my friends over to watch it, and then I do not look at the screen. I just watch their faces, and that's the enjoyment I get out of Serbian film.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I mean, I know some things about it. So I
own the Blu-ray, and we can watch it.
Do that next. Do that in Requiem for a Dream as a double feature. You'll have the
oh no.
if you haven't lost faith in humanity yet, that'll really get you.
This has been the year for it.
Yeah.
If I can go back to the riffing, Brittany, what was your thoughts on riffing? Are you for or against, or do you like?
I'm for it in this setting for sure. Yeah, probably more so in a marathon or special occasion setting. If I just go down to my local theater, I first of all don't expect it to happen there, and I don't know if I really want it to happen there because I'm specifically going to see this one movie at whatever theater nearby that I want to see. But if it's for like a whole event, I would definitely be much more open to it, and I think it would help. I think it would just kind of make it for me to have either riffing or just audience participation, whether it's riffing or just reactions or clapping or whatever. But I think it depends on whether it's kind of an event or a marathon versus just I want to go see this one movie and actually watch it.
That's a good point.
I should tell you guys one other story that I often trot out about crowd reactions making a film. In 2010, our second year of Shock Around the Clock, we showed our first three films that year were Psycho, William Castle's 13 Ghosts, and the original Frankenstein. Oh, and it was the original Frankenstein, followed by William Castle's 13 Ghosts, followed by an Illusiono, with the Illusiono viewers,
which was awesome.
Yes, followed by Hitchcock's Psycho. All wonderful films, but all black and white, somewhat tame by modern standards. Not a lot of graphic violence or nudity or anything else like that. And so our fourth film was De Palma's Dressed to Kill, and you've both seen Dressed to Kill, right?
I haven't.
Yeah, I was there, yeah. That was the first time I'd seen it, but yes.
So, Brittany, without giving away too much, the opening scene of Dressed to Kill involves a shower scene. In fact, a lot of it is kind of a riff on Psycho. Surprise, surprise. It's a Brian De Palma film that riffs on Hitchcock. The opening shot of the film is this very slow dolly into the bathroom of a very nice hotel, and there's an opaque shower glass, and you see someone is taking a shower behind it. And eventually you go inside, and you see this woman fully nude taking a shower. So when the film started, the projectionist accidentally started it with the wrong lens. So the film's playing, but it's like, oh no, it's stretched out. So then he takes the lens out, puts the right one in, but now it's blurry. And the crowd is just going, like that. And it's blurry, and he's waiting. And then he managed to get the focus right when you get the first shot of full frontal nudity. And the crowd just goes, ah! because they felt like this release, like they'd been, they'd gone through these great films with nothing explicit, and right when the explicit film gets in focus, you get the money shot. So I'll always remember that. It was very endearing in a sleazy way. But
that's so funny. I love it.
And I love that you guys don't live down there, but you're not afraid to be, I don't want to say highfalutin, but learned film critics, and also you're not adversely affected by getting down into the muck sometimes, and I really appreciate that.
It's the sacred and the profane, and I'm not Catholic, but it's very much a part of that.
I have to tell you, this was so after the let the right one in floored me, but The Fog, you showed John Carpenter's The Fog, and I laugh about this to this day. I'll just sit there and laugh, and it has since made The Fog. This is the reason I love The Fog. So there's a scene in The Fog with Tom Atkins. I believe it's Tom Atkins' character. He gets up. There's the pirates, hook, pirate, leper, zombies, ghost, whatever. There's a hook, and it knocks on the window.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you caught this, Joe, but this is like the third or fourth movie I'm watching a marathon. I'm in the far back. Someone at the very front of the theater goes, "Hook salesman." I laughed throughout The Fog, throughout the rest of the marathon, and I could not keep it together. Like my friends that I was with, they look at me, and I just start like putting my head down, and they're like "Hook salesman." I'm like, and like I like now whenever I see that scene, I come apart, because it's like
quality dry humor that you come to expect from our crowd.
I will say this. You always show great trailers, and the marathon isn't always about the movies. It's about the experiences we've let on. But and you have a scream contest, you have a costume contest, but there's always awesome old trailers and or movie, music videos or songs. It's runs the gamut. Once again, they're as diverse as the movies are themselves. You can have like Nick Cave or Misfits or this and that. Yeah. As far as movies go, but Werewolves on Wheels.
Oh my.
You always showed the showed the trailer, and I was like, oh, I got to see Werewolf. And then you always hand out a ballot. It's like, what movie you want to see? I was like, every year, Werewolves on Wheels, Werewolves on Wheels.
And then you got what you asked for.
And I got what I asked for, and I'm like, that's why they only showed the trailer. And I wasn't disappointed because I asked for it.
But, Brittany, have you seen Werewolves on Wheels, by the way?
I have not. No.
Okay, so Will's right. We showed the trailer for a long time. It's a wonderful trailer, and it makes it look like it's just the greatest thing in the world. Watch the movie. I did have the pleasure, I guess, of seeing that again at the Exhumed Films Marathon 2 years ago, and I liked it better the second time, knowing what it was. But it's very much like they really wanted to cash in on the Easy Rider market, and there's a lot of just long driving scenes, slow motion scene, bikers tumbling through sand dunes.
That frolicking in the sand specifically. Yeah, it was definitely some loving. Some biker.
There
loving.
are technically werewolves, plural, although it takes them a while to actually come around. It's an interesting curio, I'll say that. But that was one of our mistakes, that Bruce and I had never actually seen Werewolves on Wheels before we showed it. So we were dopes too. We were totally in the bag. We had to go to a highly respected university film archive to get a print of Werewolves on Wheels.
Wow.
And it was something. Yeah, but well, you're right. I mean, the trailers, I have to give Bruce a lot of credit for that. He has one of the most extensive 35 millimeter trailer collections, I think, in the world. It is amazing, and that's been such a part of the character of the event for many years. And as the years have gone on, he's pulled out more and more obscure trailers that sometimes are like Werewolves on Wheels that are more enjoyable than the features themselves. So,
moving right along, what was your absolute favorite film that you've shown there, and what was one that perhaps that you wanted to show and always gets kind of kibosh?
People ask me this all the time, though. What favorite movie, and then movie like we wanted to show, it's interesting because as much of a 35 millimeter enthusiast as I am, digital has so changed the game for what's available, and I think sometimes for the better. There's a great company that is an offshoot of the Alamo Drafthouse called the American Genre Film Archive, and their mission for a while has been to create high quality DCPs, which is the standard format for showing movies digitally in theaters. High quality DCPs of cult movies, and they have deals with Severn Films and I think with Vinegar Syndrome and some other labels. And so now, if you want to, you can see Spookies in any theater that can run digital in a high quality remastered 4K copy. It's amazing. Spookies of all films looks gorgeous and wonderful, new as day in 2020. But it's made it a lot easier to show most of what we want to show. There are very few movies left, I think, that where we think, that's the one that got away, or there's no prints anywhere. Innocent Blood, not to give away too much, but Innocent Blood has been on our shortlist for years, and that's one where prints were not available for forever. But now there's a Blu-ray of it, and it's a really nice Blu-ray, and you can do things with Blu-rays even now if that's your only option, where they can look really nice on a screen. It's not just like throwing a DVD up from a projector you put in the back of the house. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, I think now, I'll give you an example. Last year we wanted to show Trick or Treat, the 2009 Trick or Treat, the Michael Dougherty Trick or Treat. And we found out that we couldn't show it because there's a weird contractual problem with the film now, where because they originally never intended to do a theatrical release, something with the compensation to actors and crew members for a theatrical screening has now come up, and they can't license it currently. And that was a weird thing because we thought, it's Trick or Treat. It's shown before. Anyone can show that. So maybe that's something that has actually been a roadblock. But we've shown so much over the years that there's very few things that now it's like, we couldn't show that. As far as favorite films, boy, that's such a tough question. I should give the salesman's answer and say, all our films are great, please. Maybe it's favorite or maybe it's memorable. The ones I've talked about, the screenings of Serbian film or You're Next, those are memorable just because you're not going to get that experience anywhere else. I will say that I had seen Mandy in the theater twice before we showed it last year, but having full control over the sound to the theater and seeing it then, that was cool. Being able to crank the sound up and just like have your ears blistered by everything in them. That was fun.
It never gets old. And I had actually seen it twice in the theater before you'd shown it, and you guys did an awesome job. The sound was ear-rattling, but that movie just draws you in. It's so immersive. So you guys did a bang-up job on the presentation.
I'll tell you one too, that and again, this is giving away our next part of the show, but when we showed Psycho in 2011 or 2010, it was the 50th anniversary, and I mean everybody has seen Psycho at this point, and it's in the ether, it's part of the cultural consciousness. But we thought, okay, it's a classic film, and we dressed up the lobby like the Bates Motel, which was one of the best decoration jobs our crew ever did. And that film had the best reaction of any film we showed that night. And we were kind of thinking, it's Psycho, people will like it. But people just loved it. And it got such a warm response. And seeing it with that crowd, it brought that film to life. I'd seen that film 10 or 11 times beforehand. I saw that film so many times in college, I got sick of Psycho for a few years. Like, I know too much. I just want to step away. But man, seeing it again, I will never forget that screening because it came to life with that crowd. And that's kind of unforgettable. I should also mention the next year when we showed Cabinet of Dr. Caligari with a live score by Sue Harsha, Columbus's own Sue Harsha, who used to be in a very influential punk band called Scrawl. One of the best live music performances I've seen, and just a perfectly hypnotic score for a film like that.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it was great.
I guess, Britt, when we get to go and visit Joe, without spoiling your picks, what is one thing that you would like Joe to show?
Maybe Battle Royale. From 2000.
Yeah.
Kinji Fukasaku.
Oh, yeah.
That one, I think there's another one out now. Well, there's two of them. There's the first one and then that one. And then I think they might have, did they remake it or no?
It was called The Hunger Games.
Oh, well, yeah. Outside of my list that I made for our podcast, that would be something that I'd like to see there. And I think it's worth putting out there and people experiencing.
That might actually be worth bringing back. We showed that at a science fiction marathon back in, oh boy, it's been almost 10 years ago. But it was also kind of in the middle of the night. And, that film had such a strange history from being essentially banned to almost being just, it's like, it's Battle Royale. We'll watch it on Netflix. Yeah. That would be fun to bring back. I kind of lament the fact that we're past the what was, I think, regarded as the peak of like the new J-horror trend.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to go back and bring some of those back again, especially for a horror marathon crowd.
Yeah.
Well, without further ado, Signals from Pittsburgh is going to craft our own 24-hour marathon in honor of Joan and Bruce and the marathon I love so much, Shock Around the Clock. And we each picked 4 films, and we're going to unpack them here in the next part of this episode. And to start this off, Brittany, for the first annual Signals from Pittsburgh 24-hour marathon.
Sure. I'll just say that I am a big fan of letterbox.com, and I will create a marathon-specific list for this episode, and we'll link that out so that you can follow along if you decide that you want to do this marathon on your own. So my first pick is Pontypool, 2008, directed by Bruce McDonald. It's a Canadian film. I think it's an underrated film. It had a little bit of a lower budget, as far as I know. When it came out, it was kind of like a bottle episode, like the whole movie happens in just one space. I don't want to give too much away, but it all happens in a radio station. And I was especially impressed with a movie that can keep your interest for all 90 minutes or so, all in one place. Like, you would think there's only so much you can do with your camera. There's only so much you could say. There's only so many spikes of adrenaline they can give you every so often in one place. But I think they pulled it off. And I will, I guess, warn anyone who watches maybe a trailer or reads something on it that's not a spoiler. It sometimes gets put out there as a zombie movie, but it's not really a zombie movie. So I think that's all I'll say on that. But yeah, that's my first pick, and I think it deserves to kind of be put out there to the crowd.
Brittany, I really like Pontypool. I agree with you. And it is a wild concept, and they do a spectacular job developing it. I won't give anything away as well, but that's I think it's such a difficult thing to pull off, and they managed to do it. And it's in a kind of an intimate setting too, the way they do it. But yeah, that's such a fun movie. I've been wanting to rewatch that again for a long time. And I've seen all your picks, and I think I really enjoy the very progressive nature of the movies that you chose for this.
Yeah, Brittany had to bring some class into the picks as far as between the two of us. So yeah, absolutely. I've seen Pontypool. I need to revisit it, but I have seen it. I do enjoy it, and I thought it's very character driven and it's very suspense driven. And like you said, it's engaging. And maybe some of the other movies we can get into spoiler territory, but I think you guys are correct. I think it would ruin the movie for those of you who haven't seen it. So just check it out, and definitely on our social media, comment, let us know what you think. My pick for my first movie is, and I initially saw this at the marathon, is Trick or Treat from 1986, featuring Ozzy Osbourne and Gene Simmons. And Ozzy essentially has like a glorified cameo, and Gene Simmons plays a DJ. It's everything an 80s movie should be. I feel it influenced Deathgasm a lot. So the premise of the story is there is the ragman, Eddie, and he's the super fan, essentially, of this rocker named Sammy Kerr, who dies in a fire, and Gene Simmons plays Nuke, the DJ. The ragman goes to Nuke. Nuke has an acetate, the last recording of Sammy Kerr. They had banned Sammy from playing the high school where he went, and Eddie subsequently goes. And Eddie puts on the record, and he's like a nerd. He's an outcast. He's a metalhead, which wasn't cool back then. But he was, kind of bullied and kind of pushed around, not cool with the girls. But he starts playing the record. It's like backmasked, and it's telling him how to, essentially get more fierce and kind of, become assertive. And essentially it brings back Sammy Kerr from the dead in a glorious, I want to say it's kind of a rock and roll Carrie moment where he just kind of shows up and starts just killing people and zapping them with the guitar. I could listen to the Trick or Treat soundtrack on repeat. I love it. For those of you who don't know, Fastway is the brainchild of Fast Eddie Clarke, who was initially in Motorhead, and the singer Dave King, who later went on to form Flogging Molly. But Trick or Treat, if you're looking for a quintessential 80s rock and roll movie, that's my pick. I think that's the crowd pleaser. But what are your guys' thought on Trick or Treat?
Brittany, you said you haven't seen Trick or Treat?
I have not. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. So I guess I don't have too many thoughts on it other than it's always something I skipped because of the title. The newer one coming out, I saw a lot on that when it came out, and I thought it looked kind of corny. And then I found out about an older one, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go in there. But I've been hearing so many good things over the years about it, and how it's quite the treat. So I'll have to see it.
when I first saw Trick or Treat, I had only seen the trailer and the posters for a long time, and I just thought I mean, it's sold, especially by today's standards, it's kind of sold like a goofy, campy, heavy metal horror film. And there's parts of it that are that, but I was struck by how, kind of like Fade to Black, it is a very accurate portrayal of why heavy metal was such a lifeline for kids like the one in the film. That's who's the protagonist. I was kind of an oddball as a kid, but it's like you really feel for the main character in that film because that's what a lot of those kids are like, you know. And it has enough style to it that it's very enjoyable, and it gives you the goods, you know. It doesn't get too serious, but yeah, I really enjoy that film. I wish there was a Blu-ray of it domestically because for some reason it's been hung up for a long time.
And I guess we could state this too, if the listeners are going to do our marathon and follow along. The only way that I know to watch this without acquiring an expensive like Blu-ray or DVD copy is it is on YouTube. So I don't like to, openly say watch films on YouTube, but
not an endorsement to watch it on YouTube. It's just, it's
we're not saying do that, but just to let you know.
The funny part of it too is there is a domestic distributor that has the rights to it. So maybe they'll get around to doing a re-release legitimately someday.
Fingers crossed. I will pass it along to you, Joe.
Well, sadly, my first film does not have a DJ in it, unlike your films. I feel like when we talked about this beforehand, I asked that the two of you would pick your films first and I could fill in the blanks, which I liked. It does make me kind of look like the old man of the group because I realized, I should probably fill in some blanks of some older, like pre-1980s things.
I was hoping on that, actually. I was thinking you have more of the refined taste.
Well, it's not even refined. I think it's just, I think you guys are better programmers than you might give yourselves credit for.
Well, thank you.
My first pick is Psycho. Psycho because I figured with seeing the films that you had, I thought any marathon should have something that's kind of an iconic classic and a black and white film. And I think Psycho, like a small number of horror films throughout the 20th century, is one that doesn't get old. And it is in many ways as effective and relevant today as it was in 1960. And is one that, you watch it your entire life and you always discover new things about it. And just wonderful performances, and Hitchcock in a somewhat down and dirty mode, but still stylish as hell. And I think it's a testament that I think everybody knows what the hook of Psycho is and the twist of it is. But it's still a really effective study into several lost lives and how they all intersect and what happens after that. And it's funny too. I mean, there's some really dark, twisted humor in it. So yeah, I think it's one of those few, I think I said before, that has entered the cultural consciousness. I mean, people know the shower scene even if they haven't seen Psycho. It's that uniting force. So Hitchcock's Psycho is number one for me.
Absolutely. The iconic music, I mean, that goes down. Even like, once again, the shower scene and the music, if you've not seen the film. I saw it, I think, big for the second time at Shock, but I loved it, like, for what you went into earlier, just the presentation, and it kind of brought the audience alive because it's like it really is a building movie. I mean, it hits you right at the beginning, but then it's like a kind of a crescendo on many levels, many crescendos rather, and it's pretty awesome. It was way ahead of its time and kickstarted the whole horror genre, much like The Exorcist would later. So I agree with that pick. That's amazing.
Yeah, definitely a classic. The first time I heard about Psycho was my aunt. I had to have been pretty young at that time. I'm not really sure why we were talking about it, but I got into like horror and scary stuff early on in my life. So somehow we got on the subject, and I was too young to have really known or been able to do my research on Hitchcock or Psycho or anything like that. So she told me about her first experience seeing it, I think in the theater when she was a kid, and just how completely horrified and terrified she was. And actually hearing her experience and how scared she was made me excited. So I guess I was a born like horror fan. I was just like, yes, I got to see this, and at that point, I mean, I had already seen some other things that are a little more bloody and like maybe more scary in a more modern sense. But yeah, that was my first experience hearing about it. And then of course I went home to my dad, and my dad kind of helped me develop, anything I was interested in watching, we'd go out and rent it. It also helped me kind of start getting into black and white movies at that time, because I was like, oh, black and white, that means old, right? My dad's like, no, you're all wrong. We're going to go down this whole rabbit hole. So yeah. So Psycho is definitely worthy of being on the list. Oh, yeah, and I guess it's on to me. So on to myself. So my second pick is Parents from 1989. I also think it's a bit underrated at the time it came out, and I feel like it just kind of got lost. I never hear anybody really talk about it. You don't see merch online for it. Nobody really talks about this film for some reason, and I don't know how it kind of got lost within everything else around that time. I mean, 1989, maybe it was transitioning from the 80s to the early 90s, but I definitely think it's a lost little gem. It's fun. It's kind of dark. And there are a lot of really cool creative shots in the movie. There's a couple, I won't give them away, but there's some really cool shots in the movie that really make it. And you kind of get this almost kind of like a fun sense that it's almost like a sitcom gone wrong. Kind of reminds me of Too Many Cooks, if anybody's watched that. In a weird way. Just kind of, and it's about this kid who gets suspicious of his parents for whatever dark reasons that you'll find out when you watch the movie. Will, you haven't seen it yet, but we will soon.
I have not seen it yet. Yeah, so I purposely, there was I think there was a few movies that, at least that Brittany picked, I know that I had not seen, but in the fun, I'm like, well, I'll marathon them. I will be, active in this. So I'm looking forward to it. I was aware of it, and little inside information. The Vestron Blu-ray that Brittany owns for her birthday, I purchased that for her. So I purchased Parents and gifted it to her.
I talked about it all the time. You're like,
that's
you don't own the Blu-ray, but you talk about it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, oh, you got to see Parents.
Well, you'd be happy to know that Parents has been on the short list for the horror marathon for 3 or 4 years now.
Ooh,
so Brittany, if we have one next year, maybe we can play that too.
That would be amazing. I think it deserves to be seen.
My girlfriend loves Parents, one of her favorite horror films, and I am the same. I think that's one of the all-time great kids' point of view horror movies.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and it's Randy Quaid before he went off the deep end, and yeah, God, it's like that late '80s. I mean, that was like a prime time for kind of spoofing the '50s culture, and I think that's one of the great ones. And you're right, it's not that heralded, and I don't know why, because it's so good.
So my next pick is a movie I just recently watched, and it was kind of on my radar for a while. And I recently, moving to Pittsburgh about 10 years ago, have tried to dive into all the Pittsburgh shot horror films, not just the Romero. And this one was actually shot in Pittsburgh in 1992, Innocent Blood by John Landis. And John Landis is primarily known for American Werewolf in London. But I was like, well, I wonder what Innocent Blood's all about. And it actually is pretty amazing. I say it's kind of, I don't know if ahead of its time is the right word, but it kind of saw the curve coming, because it's kind of a hybrid of a lot of things. It's a vampire movie, but it's not a vampire movie. It's a gangster movie, but it's not a gangster movie. And it's a dark comedy, and it's got a very explicit sex scene.
Ooh, I'll put it in tomorrow.
I mean, I hate to start out with that, but I'm like, it kind of comes out of, you're like, okay. And then, but it's like, whoa, spoiler alert on that. But it's like, you've got Don Rickles.
Oh, that's right.
Don Rickles is doing Don Rickles. It's got Robert Loggia, cameo by a good friend of the show, Tom Savini. Yeah, he plays kind of a sleazy photographer, if you will. And Joe will help me on the pronunciation. Anne Paliar? Anne Paliar?
I took Italian in college. My French was in high school, so I'll take your word for it.
Okay. She was the original La Femme Nikita in the Luc Besson.
Yeah, that's right.
Nikita. This was kind of her initial, they kind of used it as her vehicle. She plays the main character who may or may not be a vampire. I don't ever think they come right out and say vampire, but it's pretty much implied. But there's a lot of great characters. Half the cast was later in The Sopranos, so it's kind of like proto Sopranos episode.
It was their demo reel.
So yeah, it's funny. I don't want to give too much away, but it's just kind of like a cop movie too. I love mob movies. Most of all, Goodfellas. So it's kind of like Goodfellas meets like a vampire movie, but not really. But it definitely, I feel like it's an unsung movie, especially in Pittsburgh here. But I was actually talking to Mr. Savini about it the other day, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I was in that."
I think you're right. for being a John Landis film with recognizable stars, it's like Parents. It's very unheralded, and that's too bad because it's a lot of fun and it's a really good movie. And it's another one that we've had on our short list for a while. That was one where a Blu-ray of it finally came out. So, yeah, I've only seen it once, but I really enjoy it.
And now I hand it over to you, Joe.
Well, picking up the baton that John Landis dropped after American Werewolf in London and giving it back to Joe Dante for 1980's The Howling, which I was looking through the films you guys chose and a couple of the ones I chose, and I thought, this needs a good monster movie and something that is both a frightening movie but also a funny movie. And I love Joe Dante. I think he's another one who has kind of had so many problems over the years getting films made the way that he actually wants them to be made. But he is such an unabashed fan of the genre. And throughout his career, he's been able to pay tribute to a lot of his inspirations by casting them or by, just kind of doing his riffs on the classic movies he loved. And I think The Howling is just something that gets better with age. Just from having the amazing effects by Rob Bottin, the lead performance by Dee Wallace, all the spotty characters that, the character actors that you see throughout. Genuinely creepy, but also, just enough humor that's sprinkled in that you really love it. One of his best films, easily. And something I think, Will, you talked about programming. It's something I think you could probably play at any part of the marathon, too.
Absolutely. What have you seen The Howling, Britt? I don't know if we've discussed it.
I have seen it once, but it was so long ago that I don't remember much. It's something I definitely want to revisit. I remember the wolves and creature design standing out to me. I was like blown away by that. So one of the only scenes I remember is just like the transformation, along with just some of the scenes in the dark where you're seeing this creature, but you're not seeing too much to where it looks corny. It was very scary to me at the time. And I also remember the artwork and the cover for it always caught my eye. So I need to revisit that one and refresh myself. But I was a bit young when I saw that one, I think. So
one of my favorite posters with the wolf scratching through the fabric of the image. Oh, it's just I love that.
I love it.
It was also one of those things, Joe. One of those films too that I didn't. I guess in its time, watching a little bit about it, I've watched it recently. It didn't really say what it was. I guess when it came out, it hinted that it was a werewolf movie, but it didn't steer hard into that, and that was kind of the reveal because it starts out, with there's a serial killer on the loose, and Dee Wallace plays a newscaster, and you have, like you said, great character actors like Slim Pickens is in it. But I thought the end, and I don't know if anybody else will make this correlation, I thought the end of The Howling and the end of They Live were very similar, or kind of have the same vibe, and I like that about it. And I think it got I think the transformation gets overshadowed because of American Werewolf in London, but it is a great transformation. I agree with you. But I do like The Howling quite a bit.
Cool. Brittany, I think it's back to you.
Yes, back to me. My next pick is The Lure, 2015, and there's no way I'm ever going to be able to say this director's name, and I feel so bad. It's a Polish name. I'll try it, but it's Agnieszka Smakzinska. That's the best I can do, sorry. But first of all, it's directed by a female director, and she did a wonderful job for being one of her first features. I would say it's a take on a creature. It's kind of a creature film. I guess it's not so much as The Howling, but it's a take on a certain type of creature. I guess I won't give it away. It's dark, innocent, and tragic all in one. Along with it being a musical, which is very important to know, maybe ahead of time, but don't judge it by that if you don't like musicals, because I'm not huge on musicals. But this one absolutely won me over. It definitely slid into my okay musical category. So it's kind of a horror musical, but it's an interesting kind of horrific take on a classic creature that's been around through books and stories and lore throughout, human history. What do you guys think, if you've seen it?
Once again, I have not seen it, so I'm looking forward to watching it.
I agree with you, Brittany. It is a wonderfully crazy little mashup of all sorts of things, and it is very much of its kind, and I would highly recommend it too. Yeah, and without giving anything away, but yeah, I'm with you. Even if you're not into musicals, it is so worth seeing.
I am sold. I think I had it in my hand to purchase at one point because I think there. Am I correct in saying that there's a Criterion release of it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll get on that, and then I have to now. It's part of the marathon, and that was part of. I will say there may be some listeners saying, "Well, if you guys knew each other's movies, why didn't you just watch them?" Because I wanted to have the marathon experience. I wanted films that I did not see, so I explicitly did not watch some of the movies I'd see, so I could have that experience of seeing something new. Yeah. So yes, I'm looking forward to watching that. That's going to be really cool.
Definitely. So what's your next one, Will?
My next pick, something I watched recently. I was on the fence about it initially, so if I could pontificate a little bit. So there's a resurgence of 80s movies, or movies set in the 80s. I don't say it's a resurgence now. There's a trope of movies that are set in the 80s. So there was a resurgence of 80s movies now with Stranger Things starting a few years ago. It just seems the 80s were hot. So it's like everything 80s, 80s, 80s. I have a friend that I work with call them Kids on Bikes movies. It's like everything. It's like that's what's hot right now. Kids on Bikes. Stranger Things, get kids on bikes. It's selling. This movie I guess would fall into that in a way. It's a Kids on Bikes movie, but it's summer of '84. It was, I believe it's put out by Shudder. I'm not sure if they produced it. But there's multiple directors. So Francois Simard is the first one. Anouk Wissel, I believe. And then there's a Johann Carl Wissel as well, are listed as the directors. It's set in 1984 in the summer, which is when I was born. It kind of hinges on, kind of going back to parents, that there's this kind of collective, kind of like a Stand By Me group of kids. There's the main character who's a paper boy, the overweight, lovable friend, and then he has the nerdy friend and the tough, wrong side of the tracks friend. And there's a lot of craziness going on. There's kids missing, and he is convinced that his next door neighbor, who's a police officer, is behind the murders. And it's kind of them like not believing, and then kind of, without giving the film away, seeds uncovering things here and there, and eventually convincing his friends to come along and investigate. And it sounds like a pretty basic premise, and I will say I was waiting to be disappointed, but I really liked the end of the film. I thought it was an honest, and still, like, it had quite a bit of a twist, and it was kind of terrifying, but I liked it. The characters grew on me, and I say a lot of the times, oh, that's a boring premise. Or sometimes I've been guilty of saying, I don't know if I like that premise. But if you can get the characters, like, get me to invest in the characters, then I really dig the movie. And I really like the chemistry between, the neighbor, who's actually, he's played by Rich Sommer, who was in Mad Men. He was in the early episodes of Mad Men. But he did a bang up job as a police officer. I really liked him. I was surprised how well he did it. I just really liked this movie. I was ready to be let down, and it really grabbed me, and it was something new. But I took a chance on it. I'm glad I did, and I think more people should see it. I don't know if you guys seen it.
I haven't yet.
Have seen it
yet?
But...
It's something that, like you just mentioned, I keep scrolling by because I see it and it stands out to me. But then I'm like, I don't know. I'm in this sea of other things, along with like I said, my never-ending list of movies that I never get to. I have a list, but then I go and scroll in this sea of other movies anyway and pick one of those instead. So I haven't seen it yet, but that gives me some extra faith and excitement in checking it out. So yeah, it's on my list now.
I agree with what you said, Will. I really liked it. And it's a testament to the filmmakers that they take what is a pretty stock scenario and what could be stock characters, and they create these very fully formed people. And there's more real drama to it than you'd expect from a film like that. I've been wanting to rewatch that because I think it's a really strong entry.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, but yeah, I was totally expecting to go in and say, oh, this is going to be a by the numbers Kids on Bike movie, and not to like degrade those movies, but it's going to be a by the numbers nostalgia fest. And I didn't. They didn't. It would have been very easy for them to play to that, and it was more the setting than the driving force of the film. And I think
you're right. Yeah, it doesn't feel like just pandering to 80s nostalgists. It just happens to be set in 1984.
But yeah, well, I'm glad you agree, and I'm glad you dug that one. So yeah, definitely everybody check that out. It is on the list, and I believe it is your turn.
Well, it's a ways away from summer of '84, but 1977, it wouldn't be a marathon to some people if I didn't put a David Lynch film in. I was trying to, after seeing your selections, both of you, I was trying to figure out, okay, so what could bring something that's not in there yet? And you could argue, I guess, that The Lure has some slightly David Lynchian aspects to it. But boy,
there's a couple sequences. Eraserhead,
which has been a controversial film sometimes. We have shown it a 24-hour and we've shown it a 14-hour fest. I often tell people that the older I get, as much as I love horror films, there are fewer things in horror films that truly unnerve me. It happens to everybody. At a certain point, you start enjoying them for the aesthetics or just for the storytelling. But in terms of really scaring you, there's not as much. But David Lynch, to this day, can still unnerve me with so many of the things that he puts in his films. And Eraserhead, I think, is one of the great examples of being able to capture a kind of almost a waking nightmare. And knowing what the background of where he was at the time in his life, and kind of being adrift and having his first child, who he and his wife weren't sure that was part of the plan. Knowing that, I think gives you a lot of insight to where he was in his life. But also, it's what I love a lot about Lynch and all of his films and all of his projects is that he's not afraid to tap into the subconscious and just portray it and see what comes out and not give, necessarily clear motivation. And he has that touch, I think, where you can create great art from those and you follow along. And I think Eraserhead can be explained easily in one way, but I also think that what makes it enduring is it's so mysterious, and stylistically, for being a film that had no budget at all, it works so well in conjuring up just this mood of dread and confusion and terror and humor and claymation worms and all sorts of stuff. So I love Eraserhead. I think it is still the quintessential midnight movie, and I'm getting excited to watch it again now. So I
feel like it's something you could potentially explain and spoil it to high hell, and then still have the person watch it for the first time and be blown away.
Yeah,
it's just one of those movies. I remember watching this shortly after Psycho, because I would just go to the video store with my dad, and we'd just either pick out things based on the movie artwork, which was a big thing for me, or I'm thankful that they were open to pretty much renting any weird thing that I pointed out. But
Brittany, you have the coolest parents.
They definitely indulged, and I think I turned out all right because of it. But yeah, so it's been a while, and it's something I'd like to revisit. And I always joke to Will about his hair looking a little bit.
Yeah.
Got the Jack Nance. That will be with next year if you do the costume contest. I'll do the.
Just frazzle.
You really were sick, weren't you? What's funny, because I think to me Jack Nance is playing David Lynch, right? I'm not. That's not lost.
They
right?
were best friends until the day he died, and I think from what you see about David Lynch now, there's a lot of David Lynch in that character.
God, that's such a great pick. It seems like such an obvious pick, but then when you unpack it, it kind of is the quintessential David Lynch film. It kind of gives you a roadmap of what to expect, and if you look at Eraserhead, all the tropes are there. Even like the sexy neighbor, there's always an alluring woman in his film. So it's like, and then you showed it, so we got to see it. I think you guys showed it right at midnight too, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah. So that was amazing, because I hadn't seen it in the theater, and to see it at midnight when it's supposed to be viewed, and to see it at midnight at Shot Around the Clock. Yeah. So it was the epitome of viewing.
I'm thinking about the lineup that the films you guys have talked about so far, and there's like a mini thread of kids in horror, or the perspective of kids or young people. And I think too, that's one of the things I love about Lynch, is that he taps into things that you're scared of as a child or as a young person, that as an adult you learn to put away, or you learn that they're not real. I think it's what I've always loved about him, is he has maintained that ability to tap into a very childlike sense of terror and bring it into an adult perspective. And that I think is what's so freaky, because it's like the stuff that you're not supposed to care about anymore, he just exploits and pushes to the front. And maybe that's why I'm such a huge fan of his.
It's great. Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's a great introduction. That was a great choice.
Brittany, I think it's
All right.
back to you for number 4.
Back to me, my last pick. My last pick is I Saw the Devil, 2010 by Kim Ji-woon. That's a South Korean filmmaker. This movie is just explosive, is one of the best ways to put it. It's a very satisfying and bloody revenge film at its core. But I think it's a little bit more than that. Our inciting incident right from the get-go just throws you into kind of what you're going to be in for, or what you think you're going to be in for. And then as you keep going, it just keeps pushing further and further and further with its, again, explosive but very realistic violence. And it is a very bloody film, but I don't think it's bloody and gory for just the sake of it. They really do a good job building the characters and their motivations, so that when this like extreme violence occurs, it doesn't feel like it's there just to be there. It feels either justified or within something that character would actually do. I think that one got lost kind of as well, but for other reasons, especially being a foreign film, it's hard to kind of get that exposure over here, but I think it deserves it.
Will, have you seen I Saw the Devil?
I believe you guys have screened this, but I believe it was at one of the years I had to work, so I missed it.
Yeah, actually, we have never actually screened it, believe it or not. I think we talked about it, but we couldn't make it work.
Okay, so I think maybe it was on the agenda.
Yeah.
I talked to you about it, but I know I did not see The Devil. But ironically, I love revenge flicks,
Yeah.
so it's a glaring oversight. But now I'm pumped because to me it sounds a little bit like it sounds kind of like Old Boy, but I'm just projecting. But I'm really excited to see it. So
Brittany's description is spot on. It's about what is maybe most terrifying. It's what regular humans are capable of, and how you might not think that you are. But and just stylistically, just such a strong film and really compelling. And it's one that some people would look at and say, well, I don't know if that's a horror film, but it's like, I don't know. It's like saying Psycho's not a horror film because there's no monsters, but it's terrifying and it is disturbing. And yeah, that's a really good one.
Thanks. Horrific in a different way.
Yes.
it is something you would rotate into the lineup. So you'll play films that aren't necessarily quote unquote horror films, but fall into, for example, last year you played David Cronenberg's Crash. That was the first time I'd seen it.
Wow.
Not to go too off topic, but had you not played that film, I think that was the highlight of the night for me. I mean, nothing against anything else, but I'm like, God, what a great movie. And I would have not, I love Cronenberg, but I wouldn't have sought it out. So back to, I Saw the Devil. Is that is something that would fall under your banner?
I think it's enjoyable. And we try to do it for science fiction too, when we can, but pushing at the boundaries of the genre and trying to bring things in that people will kind of give us guff sometimes for showing, but it's a different perspective, But yeah, that's what makes the genre interesting. I understand the nostalgic point of view and saying, oh, a horror film is all about, a vampire or a werewolf or anything. I get that. I think it's more interesting when you can move those forward in different ways too.
So agreeing with you, I also have to say I'm a bit of a hypocrite, and Brittany probably didn't think I was going to bring this up because she picked the film, and I said, that's not a horror. I know I haven't seen it, but that's not a horror film. And you're like, no, the third act is horrific. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's going to fall, So I said, can you pick something else? And she said, yeah. To be fair, I think I should let you defend your choice that I said you should pick something else on. So what was your alternate number 4 choice?
My alternate was Sorry to Bother You.
Oh, wow. Oh my God, that would be fun.
That's such a fun movie. And I also think it's a little underrated. I don't know too many people who have seen it. But no, I mean, I guess, it doesn't technically fall in straight up horror. It can fall in science fiction, kind of comedy, fantasy weirdness. It's such a weird movie. But no, I think that whole third act is just horrifying and just kind of goes off into left field. Like, you watching it, not knowing anything about it. Yeah. it's just going to take you on a whole ride. But I find it pretty horrifying.
I love Sorry to Bother You. I would attend a marathon that showed Sorry to Bother You any day.
So I was wrong, and
I think Sorry to Bother You. It's like the horrific part of it through most of the film is about the insidious, creeping horrors of modern life, you know, and how you really have to pay attention because around the edges, it's like, oh, it's getting really bad, but everything looks good, you know. Yeah, that's such a good film.
I feel
okay,
validated
Will. It's okay.
now.
I am willing to validate you in this case. Absolutely.
Right. So, and I meant to see it in the theater, and it just one of those things. Life got in the way, which is never a good excuse. And then I just I didn't really boo-hoo the movie. I just said I don't know if it fits, but I am reaffirmed by you two, so I will watch it. I will go out of my way and make sure I watch it because it's got a ringing endorsement from the two of you. So
I would watch it again if you want to do a watch along.
Okay, absolutely. Well, we can.
I think too, and I don't admit this too often, but I think one of the reasons Sorry to Bother You would be fun in a marathon is you might piss some people off, and I think that's good. I think that's good sometimes. You know, you can't all be about just like comfortable films that people like.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think part of being a horror movie is it should be horrific. And earlier, alluding to what you said earlier, few things horrify you anymore because you just become a fan of the aesthetic of the genre. So where do we have to go? Shit, in 2020, will anything ever scare us again? You know, after 2020, you know, are we even capable of being terrified? But I guess my last pick is one that I brought up earlier that just had such a profound effect on me and really moved me, and it's the original Let the Right One In by Thomas Alfredson. Seeing it there, it takes you on so many emotional wavelengths because you know the young boy, he's kind of an outcast, comes from a broken home, doesn't have anyone to talk to, and then finds this friend in Ellie, but we all know what she is. I mean, we come to learn what she is and what his fate is, but deep down she really does care for him. So you know, he and her, you know, have to live through these horrific events for her to survive and do these horrific things. But by the end of the film, there's like a deep felt love, and it's such a it's a love story, but it's so, you know, it's dark and twisted, but it's also endearing and childlike. So I just love it. I never get tired of it. I could watch that movie any day of the week, and it's one of my favorite of all time. I just love that film.
It's a good one.
That's I had debated on between I Saw the Devil and Let the Right One In, so I was happy to see that you wanted to put it on yours for your fourth one. But yeah, I watched that one on a whim back when it was on Netflix. It was just, you know, all my movies except for The Lure I watched on a whim just because I saw them and clicked on them and gave it a shot. But yeah, that one was amazing. And you know, a lot of times the first thing that that stands out to me about a movie, like thinking back, is like a scene that I thought was just kind of ridiculous, but the neighbor getting attacked by all the cats. I know it's horrible, but it just cracked me up, and she's just like flying around. It's just so funny.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it was kind of supposed to be a little bit like funny over the top in a dark way. But it wasn't like, it didn't take you out of the movie. I was still, you know, very, very impressed with the movie, but there's a lot of scenes in that movie that just like really, really hit hard. And it was just the pacing was amazing. I thought, just perfect, and just kind of a sad story too. So yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. I love the cat scene. I love, even there's some comedy with Ely attacking her prey, like where she's jumping on their back. It's just like this young, girl, like, little thing, like creature jumping on and flailing off the back. One of the scenes that really felt is where she wants to come in and Oscar has to invite her in, and he says, you know, what happens if I don't do it? He's like, just come in. He's like, what's stopping you? There's nothing. And then she comes in and she starts to, you know, deteriorate, and the childlike petulance, and it turns to absolute horror and, you know, remorse in his eyes. And it's like the way those actors were amazing. Really, like the way they conveyed those feelings were outstanding. But what say
I
you,
agree
Jim?
with everything both of you said. I am noticing that I think of the entire lineup we have, 7 of the 12 films deal in some way with children or teenagers. So maybe this is the traumas of youth marathon in some ways.
Yeah. Good subtitle.
Yeah, maybe I have some unresolved issues. Yeah.
It's so well done. I even like the remake, the American remake, which is, it's like the same film, just
Oh, wow.
different actors and different setting. But it's a great story, and it's when we talked about Parents and we talked about Summer of '84, films that are kind of about just what seems like everyday mundane life, but they're injected with a sense of something that might be completely not mundane at all. And yeah, it's wonderful, and it's very touching.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's a strong thread throughout all the films we've had is really good performances.
Yeah.
And character work that really draws you into the film. So yeah, Let the Right One In is of course highly recommended.
It seems like, am I correct in saying you've seen every film that we've listed so
I have,
far, correct?
yes.
Okay, so my bonus pick is one that I don't think you've seen yet.
Oh,
but
I think I know what this might be.
It's Possessor.
Yeah.
So if something goes wrong, if the reel won't play, we have to have a backup plan. Not that Possessor would be a backup plan, but Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor. We just recently saw this in the theater, and I'm still unpacking it. It was viscerally arresting. And like you say, there's few movies now that really scare you, but Cronenberg, it's in the blood because he has it. Going back to Brittany actually showed me Antiviral. I had not seen Brandon's films, and I've seen a lot of Cronenberg movies through you. Like they did like Crash last year, and then they came from within, which Shivers I saw big because of you, which was a great film. But his son is nailing it. But Possessor, I don't want to give anything away.
I have seen the trailer, and I am very jealous that you have both been able to see it, and I have not. I don't understand how I'm living in Boston of all places, and the only place it's showing is in a drive-in that's like far too out of the way to go to at this point. So I might have to wait till VOD. I know it's sacrilege. I'm excited. It's one of the things I miss about Columbus is if I lived in Columbus still, I probably would be. I would have been able to see it. But yeah, I enjoyed Antiviral a lot, and you're right. He definitely has that very probing, visceral intellect that his dad has as well. So
yeah, definitely.
No spoilers, but yeah, you will not be disappointed.
That's cool. Yeah, that makes me excited to see it.
Absolutely, and I hope you get to see it soon. On to you and your final pick.
The final film. Okay, it's one that was a hit in its time, but is difficult to see these days. One of the kind of great unsung stories of modern films, and especially modern horror, is there's this whole run of films from mid-'80s through the mid-'90s where the rights have reverted back to their production companies or a production company. And so they're much more difficult to see than you'd think, which is weird because they're not even that old. And this is one of those films which I think in America was distributed by Columbia TriStar, so a big studio, but also had financing through HBO Pictures, which I think is part of where the hang-up comes in. And that is 1986's The Hitcher, which is a crime that it's not. There's a German Blu-ray of it, but it's not available in the U.S. legitimately. There's only an old DVD that just looks terrible. Insider's point, there's a German Blu-ray. It says it's Region B only, but it will play on Region 1 player. Don't tell anyone I told you that. They'll probably go back and reprint them now right. But and it's actually pretty nice. I recently rewatched it again. I seem to keep rewatching The Hitcher in the middle of the night. In some ways, I think is perfect for that film because you talk about Eraserhead being almost like a waking nightmare. The Hitcher is like a nightmare in daylight. What's the worst possible thing that could happen to you when you're just driving across the country? And I think also it's a great testament to the collaborative process in filmmaking because it's a film where the director, who is Robert Harmon, mainly was a TV director. And kind of, aside from The Hitcher, doesn't have that distinguished of a career. But the performances, for one, obviously from Rutger Hauer and 80s teen heartthrob C. Thomas Howell, and the great Jennifer Jason Leigh in a pretty early role. Those are all wonderful. The cinematography for me makes it. And it's so fun that you go back and you see this movie that was directed by a guy who basically went on to do a lot of TV. But the director of photography is John Seale, who would go on to be nominated for 5 Oscars for Peter Weir's Witness, Rain Man, Cold Mountain, Mad Max Fury Road, and then he would win an Oscar in 1997 for The English Patient. So he has this amazing pedigree afterwards. And you can look up his CV. He's worked on so many things. He's been a camera operator on a lot of things. Not a household name necessarily, but the atmosphere that he is able to create from essentially people hanging out at road stops, inside a car, and just on a deserted highway is impressive. I love how nothing in it really makes 100% logical sense, much like great nightmares and horror films are. It kind of reminds me of It Follows in a way. I've met a lot of people over the years who don't like It Follows because they say it doesn't make any sense. And I always thought, well, the director said it's supposed to be like a nightmare. It's supposed to be like when things you do in nightmares don't make any sense sometimes. You have plots in nightmares that are dumb. You're running along in nightmares and you can't go anywhere. And The Hitcher reminds me of that too, because it's like, how does Rutger Hauer keep getting out of these situations, even though he's not supernatural, but he's the Hitcher.
That's a good way to put it.
If you get a chance, if you're into The Hitcher out there, for people listening, check out the German Blu-ray. It's really nice, and yeah, I love that movie so much.
It definitely has a driving pulse. I mean, you can't go wrong with Rutger Hauer, in my opinion, and that's right off Blade Runner, or not too far.
Few years after.
I mean, there may have
one
been
of his bigger roles after that.
Yeah, and I mean, God, and C. Thomas Howell, he was great. Yeah, I agree with you, and I'll watch anything with Jennifer Jason Leigh. She's in Possessor
that's right.
too. So, I mean, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and the odd thing was I watched it, and then initially, and then a few months later, they did a remake. Was it Sean Bean or whatever? And the remake was like, it was like the same movie, but they missed the beats or something. It wasn't a terrible movie, but it was just like, okay, that's a movie. All right, next movie. But no, like you said, the original one, like it sticks with you, and I think it had a lot to do, like what you said, the cinematography, the tension. God, and it's like Rutger Hauer is so like vindictive and nasty in that movie.
Yeah, I love his character in it. That's what makes it for me, is just his character, and I think it's very intense right out of the gate, and for me, it just kind of keeps it there. It's intense. It kind of gets your blood pumping, and then takes you on a little bit of a ride throughout the movies. So no, that one was a good one. I also saw that one a long time ago too. I could use a refresher on that one, but yeah, as like a younger teenager probably, that I saw it for the first time when I was at the point of renting my own movies, and I could just go watch them on my little 12-inch TV upstairs without my parents. So yeah.
We had Signals from Pittsburgh have region free, so we're good. Well, you can have a bonus film.
Oh God, a bonus film.
One that you may have excised by a hair, or
I did have the one bonus film that I originally put in and then replaced with Psycho was the Roger Corman version of The Mask of the Red Death. Which might be very timely and appropriate these days for many reasons, but. One of my favorite Corman films and one of my favorite Vincent Price films, and maybe not the creepiest of the Corman, Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe films, but surely the most beautiful. Nicholas Roeg, before he got into his directing career doing camera work, and just decadent, and Vincent Price in one of his nastiest roles, visual delight, and also kind of a great representation and expansion of a pretty short story by Poe. So I'll have that as my bonus feature.
Exactly, you summed it up perfectly. When I saw this, I was not. Criminally at that point, I had not seen that many Vincent Price films because you have to. I found myself having to get into modes. So I'm like, now I'm in my Vincent Price mode, or I'm in my Hammer mode. So I'm gonna eat all this up. But after I saw that film, I thought the different. I really remember the scenes with the different color rooms, just the production, the set design, and like you said, the way the camera moves. Vincent Price is great in it. I forget the exact line, but he essentially calls someone's wife a whore and laughs at them.
Oh yeah.
I was like, this movie's pretty. This is pretty intense.
He's just so nasty and unlikable in that, which is he's very wonderful.
Yeah, no, good bonus pick. I love it. Once again, as we can let you go here, we really appreciate having you. I could talk to you for hours, but I know your poor girlfriend's probably wondering where is my boyfriend?
I think we covered it, and that was a very fun conversation, and I had a blast talking to you.
Thank you.
Please come on again.
I would love to. I'm honored that you invited me, because this has been a lot of fun.
This has been a blast, and I was worried, not from you. I know you can hold your own, but I feel like it was engaging, and I hope our fans think the same, what fans we have out there. But I had a blast, and I would love to do this again. I think we've been in discussion for a milestone episode. We're going to do a Cronenberg episode because it's a kind of spoiler alert. Well, little hint, our name is found in a Cronenberg movie.
Yeah, I should know that. Yeah. Of course.
Well, you do know. Obviously, you know.
You made the connection.
Oh yeah. I know. I'm like the fire extinguisher, break glass if you need someone to just talk about Cronenberg for hours on end. So
awesome. I really had fun. So thank you for coming on, Joe. Thank you for all you do. And is there anything you would like to plug? Any way we could help you or the marathon?
Well, we're in this whole holding pattern right now, so who knows what the future of the marathons will be. I'm hoping that they come back, but as we have all learned from our current situation, it's a fool's errand to think too far ahead on anything right now. But we are still around at www.scifimarathon.com and at www.horrormarathon.com. And I found the YouTube page. If you look, Ohio 24-Hour Marathons, we have our own YouTube page. I have been remiss in not posting any older videos for a while, but I'm going to try to ramp that back up because we certainly have footage from lots of great things from past years, dating back to the Drexel North years, back in the Paleolithic era. So, and we're on Facebook, and we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram, although that's not updated that much. So check us out there. And like I said, I'm honored that you guys invited me on here. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is kind of a bonus side thing at the end. We like to have our guests say a little line at the end here. Put your own flair on it if you want to.
Oh, yeah. This is Joe Neff, and you're listening to Signals from Pittsburgh.